Time for another board game review, and this time we have the game Sky Team. This was going to be my Scorpion Masqué, and is designed by Luc Raymond. Take the controls of a commercial airliner and become a team of pilots. Coordinate your efforts and try to successfully land your plane. Feel all the tension from inside the cockpit. Let me show you how to play. So Sky Team is a cooperative game. You play with 2 players, and both of you sit on either side of this board. You also each have screens. These not only have player aids on inside of them, but you have to roll your dice in secret, even though it is a cooperative game. So you use these to keep your dice private. One side will get the blue dice, and one side will get the orange dice. So at the beginning of each round, there are 7 rounds. You can do some discussion. You can talk about, oh, we need to get rid of this plane, or we need to advance 2 spaces. You cannot discuss the dice that you rolled. So you'll roll them behind this. I'll just show them publicly just for examples. But normally these would be hidden behind your screen. And so you can't discuss the dice and what's on them. You can't say something like, if you get a 6, put it here. Instead, you can just discuss like what are like priorities of things you need to make sure you do that round. These are reroll tokens. If you have a reroll token, you can use it to reroll 1 or more of the dice behind your screen. Then, once you have had your discussion, you will each take a turn placing dice. The blue player goes first, they're the pilot. On your turn, you place 1 and only 1 of your remaining dice on a free space on the control panel. And you can see on here, they're marked in colors. So these are only blue dice can go on these, only orange dice can go on these, and these blue or orange dice can be placed. They have specific constraints. For example, this only a 2 can go here, a 3 or a 4 could go here. Any dice can go here, but it's important which one. I'll explain that later. But as you can see, they have specific dice totals or numbers that can go on them. Now, there are 2 actions that you have to do at least once each round. It's this one and this one, or this one and this one, if you are the orange player. If you don't fill these 4 slots, you immediately lose at the end of the round. This is the axis of the plane. So what happens is, when you place, at the end of the round, actually, I'm sorry, not the end of the round, but as soon as the second die is placed, then you'll trigger the axis change. So let's say the blue player plays a 5 here, and then the orange player puts a 4. What you do is you compare the difference. If they were exactly the same, 5 and a 5 or something, you wouldn't change anything. But in this case, you're going to move this 5 minus 4 is 1, and so you will move it this way, like that. You always turn the arrow towards whoever played the higher die. If you ever reach one of these red X's, you instantly lose the game. So it becomes a precarious balancing act. And a victory condition at the end of the game, at the end of the final round, this plane needs to be completely horizontal. But the trick is, you have to place dice here every round. So you just got to make sure it doesn't go all the way to the side, and you got to make sure by the end of the game, it's perfectly horizontal. The engines kind of work in a similar way. As soon as the second die is placed, you add the dice together, and that is your speed. So let's say I put a 6, and orange player put a 1. Now, if the sum, in this case it's 7, but let's say it was less than the weakest of the 2 aerodynamic markers. So for example, right now the blue is at between 4 and 5. So if it were a total of 4 or lower, you would leave the approach track, and that means this green strip up here. You would leave it in place. If the sum is right in the middle, in which this case it is, you would approach the track 1 space. So in this case, since it's 7, it's right between the blue and the orange markers. This strip will go down 1. If the sum was higher than this orange marker, in this case 9 or above, you would move this 2 spaces. So if it were 2 instead, it would be 1, 2. Now, it's okay if airplanes are here. However, if there are airplanes on here and you have to slide it down, an airplane crashes and you instantly lose the game. Also, This final airport space, if you overshoot it and this goes down, like, let me just take these off. If this was here and you overshot it and you went like this, you also lose the game because you overshot your position. So these spaces here are radio spaces. And the pilot only has one, the co-pilot has two. So when you place a die here, let's say I placed a 3, for example. You count the number of spaces starting with your current position. Let me move this up. And you would go 1, 2, 3, and you would remove an airplane from that space. If you played a 1, and if there was an airplane on your current space, you would remove that. This is how you remove those airplanes so that they don't crash. One of the victory conditions of the game, as there are many, is you have to remove all these airplanes before the end of the game. You also have to make sure that you land at the airport at the end of the game as well. Now let's go into landing gear. On the pilot side, you just gotta place a die matching the right numbers, and you immediately get to tuck the switch over to green. When you do that, you advance this marker 1 space over. And so now the speed totals will shift on what they do. All 3 of these need to be on before the end of the game as a victory condition. Similarly, on the orange side for the flaps, same thing. You gotta place the right die. If you do, you turn on a switch, but every time you do that, this marker also moves forward. And all of these have to be green by the end of the game. You can see the co-pilot has a few more. These coffee cups are concentration spaces. You can, at any time, you can place a die there, and you immediately get a coffee token. Coffee tokens are useful because you can use these to modify your die values. Whenever you spend a coffee token like this, whatever die you have, you can modify it. You can add 1 or subtract 1 to it to make it easier to place on the board. Like classic rules, subtracting 1 from 1 doesn't change it to 6, and adding 1 to a 6 doesn't change it to a 1. And you get to keep these coffee tokens in between rounds if you haven't used them. Now let's talk about brakes. The pilot has these brakes here. And similarly, you have to place die that match the number to turn on the switch. Oh, I'm sorry, but these have to be done in order. So the 2-1 would have to be done first. You'll then immediately advance the red brake marker 1 space forward. These only have an impact in the game's final round. Why this is important is because at the end of the game, your speed must be less than the position of the red brake marker. So if you don't upgrade this thing, it's gonna be real hard because you're gonna have to make sure your speed is 2 if you want to survive. If you can get it up all the way, at the very least, you can at least do 6 or lower. Now, once you've placed your dice for the round, all 8 of them, then what happens at the end of the round is this altitude track up here goes down 1 space, always. So like this. In this case, I would have gotten the reroll token. Then everyone takes back their dice, and if the airport image is in your current position screen, and the airplane image, so basically just like perfectly in sync, like this, then you proceed to the end of the game section. If not, you do another round, and you keep doing this until this occurs. Now remember, it can be dangerous because if you advance this too far and you overshoot it, or if you reach this here but you're not at the airport yet, you crash land and you lose. So you have to make sure that these go down in relative sync so that at the end of the game, it looks like this. Once you have reached the right altitude and you've reached the airport, then you check your engines and your speed. You got to make sure that it's lower than whatever your brake marker is at. And then you check your victory conditions. If there were no airplanes on the approach track, if you cleared them all, obviously if you hadn't, you would have been dead already. But make sure there are no airplane tokens here. Make sure all the switches on your flaps and landing gear are all green. Make sure your airplane's axis is completely horizontal, and make sure that your current speed is less than your brakes. If you do that, then you win. Now there are some variants that they offer. I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's kind of like a secret, but they have a flight log and it has a bunch of different airports and also a bunch of different modules that they add to the game. But since they kind of encourage you to play the base game first, I will not go into them on here to keep them a surprise. But that's pretty much it. You just roll your dice and try to... I forgot to say, during the... This is a pretty important thing, is that during the rounds, you can't communicate. You have to be completely silent doing all that during the round. That's why that discussion phase at the start of the round is very important, because you can start prioritizing, all right, you should do this, I should do this, you should do that. But once you start placing die, no talking. And that's the game. This is a great two-player co-op game. I love these like dice placement action games, and I really enjoy the sort of back and forth of discussion priorities, and then you have to sort of like silently trust each other to get things done during the round. It's a very entertaining balancing act of trying to avoid doom and so many ways to lose, but it never feels overwhelming to process. You always feel like okay, these are things I have to do by the end. Just make sure that we don't crash, make sure this doesn't happen. It's really satisfying. The game also offers plenty of variety with its modules and challenges to keep the gameplay fresh and interesting. I enjoy that the board is slightly asymmetrical. It's fun having to manage your own side of the board. I honestly wish there was more of that, just a little more like unique things on your side versus the other side. They feel a little samey, but I would have loved a little more. But I mean, overall, that's a very minor quibble. I think this is really solid. I also really appreciate how quick the reset time is for the game. All you gotta do, like if you lose, you just flip the switches, move the little vertical strips, and it's really easy to reset. You can almost instantly reset it, try again, which I think is key for a co-op game, because then in other co-op games, when you lose, you're like, we're not gonna play it again, we gotta set up this whole board. This one, really breezy setup, really breezy reset. I highly recommend this one. I think it's great.